We've got the EU elections coming up. Now, you said on your For the Many podcast a couple of weeks ago, in fact, that you weren't going to say who you were voting for. But maybe just give us a bit of an insight into what you think about the options that are open to people at the moment.
Well, I think you look at the opinion polls, and I think it's quite clear what people are doing. Most people who voted Leave in the referendum are inevitably going to support the Brexit Party because they feel completely betrayed, particularly by the Conservative Party, but in many ways also by the Labour Party, who are trying to straddle the fence of Remain and Leave. Jeremy Corbyn says, well, we're trying to unite the country, bring everyone together, which actually is a strategy that has worked so far. But I think in these elections it doesn't work, and you're gradually seeing support ebb away from the Labour Party, and a lot of it's going to, or some of it's going to the Brexit Party, some of it is going to the Liberal Democrats. I mean, their opinion poll rating is really on the up. So I don't think any of that is a particular surprise. In some ways, it is surprising that the Brexit Party are polling so well, and we're still, as we sit here now, 8 days away from the election, so it may be that they squeeze the Tory vote even more.
In terms of the Brexit Party, I mean, people are talking about the fact that if they do stay on afterwards and that, they try and be a party that is really wanting to sort of shake up and change the political landscape in this country. But I mean, surely one of the pitfalls and problems that they're going to come across is the fact that at the moment what's bringing both Brexiteers on the left and the right together is the fact that they just want to get out. But when you're trying to then be a party, creating a manifesto, where you're trying to decide foreign policy, domestic, social, economic. I mean, in terms of the left and the right spectrum, although you've got left-wing people wanting to get out of the EU as well as right-wing, I mean, when it comes to economic and social policy, they're going to be completely divided. So it's almost been set up to fail in that sense.
It's difficult to have Claire Fox and Anne Widdecombe in the same political movement. On Brexit, they're united. So there's no problem on that. But you're absolutely right. Afterwards, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because Nigel Farage has made quite clear he wants to stand candidates at the next general election whenever it is. And that is going to prove quite difficult, I think, in some ways, because they will have to have some sort of coherent policy platform. You can't go into a general election with no policies, just sort of saying, well, vote for us because we're not them. That's okay. There'll be some people that would accept that as an appeal, but more generally, people want to think, well, if they do either form a government or become part of a government, well, what are they going to do? What are their priorities? Now, what people have missed so far is the constitution of the Brexit Party, which actually does give a bit of an indication as to which direction they would head in. I can't remember the exact details, but it's sort of small state, and it looks a little bit Thatcherite. Now, whether they stick to that, I'm not so sure, because I think there is room in this country for a political party that may be slightly left of centre, maybe on economic issues, and slightly right of centre on some other issues. Change UK had the opportunity to be this party, but they haven't taken it.
Well, that's the thing. Do you think that Change UK, it's a good idea, but sort of poorly executed?
Well, it couldn't have been executed any more poorly than it has been, really. I mean, every day they are the gift that keeps on giving. Even today, their lead candidate in the Euro elections in Scotland says he's going to vote Liberal Democrat. Well, what message does that send? They've had a calamitous social media campaign. Most things that could have gone wrong have gone wrong. And I do wonder now whether they aren't having some sort of existential crisis, and then whether after the Euro elections they will just think, well, OK, we gave it a try, it hasn't worked, and they'll all sort of bugger off to the Liberal Democrats.
Now, obviously, we've seen a return to frontline politics with Anne Widdecombe. With that in place, I mean, has that ever made you think in your head about wanting to stand at all again? Because you've tried in the past, but...
Not really. I was asked if I'd like to be a candidate for the Brexit Party, and I declined with thanks. Mainly because I would not be prepared to give up my job at LBC. And yeah, look, anyone who's been involved in politics or the periphery of politics, the political virus never quite goes away. And when it looked as if there might be a snap general election, there was a few days then when I thought, but I'm not going to do it.
Now, obviously, with Mental Health Awareness Week, there's been a lot of chat about MPs and Parliament, because some people they treat MPs as if they're not human at the end of the day. And I remember listening to a podcast that Matt Chorley did for the Red Box, and I thought it was really well done, because he solely focused on the mental and health well-being of MPs and Parliament during Brexit, because their sort of unpredictable hours that they have to work. They don't know what's happening. Sometimes they only have a couple of hours to read certain bills or documents before then having to debate on them within Parliament. So when they're trying to then book, GP appointments back in their constituencies, being able to sort of travel back and forward, I mean, could you even sort of begin to imagine how this would have an impact on their well-being?
I think it does, certainly with some of the newer MPs who had no idea what they were letting themselves in for. And remember, at each election there are a group of MPs elected who didn't expect to get elected. And there are also those who didn't expect to lose, but nobody ever concerns themselves with those, because that must be a real shock when you lose your seat and you didn't expect to. But I think particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, I think that the whole Brexit scenario has brought pressures on MPs which they haven't had before. Social media hasn't helped in that. Twitter is not a healthy place for MPs at the moment. I had Emily Thornberry on my programme yesterday, and I tweeted, anyone got any questions for Emily Thornberry? I deliberately didn't at her on it because I thought I kind of knew that there would be some negative reaction. I had about 400 replies to that, and of which one I could use on the programme. And most of them were insulting her appearance, her character. I mean, take issue with her political beliefs all you like. But she doesn't, whatever she's done, people kept bringing up the English flag thing, whatever she's done or said in the past, it does not warrant the character assassination that people seem to be quite happy to dole out. Now, some MPs, it'll be water off a duck's back. And I get some of that myself. And if I was a sensitive little flower, it really would probably affect me. And there was a time a few weeks ago when I remember I was just at home watching TV, but you sort of got your laptop at your side, sort of just looking at TweetDeck as things go on. And somebody insults you, and you start to feel a bit angry, and then you think, shall I reply to that? And you sort of start to get even angrier, and you think, well, actually, this is affecting my mental health. So I just shut the laptop down. But it is addictive, and I think if you're an MP, you can't reply in the manner which you would do if you weren't an MP sometimes. Jackie Smith told an anecdote the other day on the For the Many podcast, where this is when her first election campaign in the 1990s, and this woman was harassing her on the street, kept sort of shouting in her ear. And in the end, Jackie just turned around and said, why don't you just fuck off? And the woman went to the local paper, and Jackie, she said she doesn't have sleepless nights, but she did that night because she thought her political career was at an end. Well, of course, on Twitter, it's very easy to do that because you haven't got the person in your face. You can they're an anonymous person, so you tweet something wrong, and that can then bring the wrath of Hades on you. And I do sympathise with MPs to that regard. I don't sympathise on the workload. If you don't know what the workload is likely to be, don't stand for Parliament is the answer. And no one's going to ever have any sympathy with MPs for the workload because they imagine they get 6 months holiday a year, they're only in Parliament 3 or 4 days a week. What a cushy number, because they don't realise what MPs do in their constituencies and what actually really does go with the job. So I sympathise to that extent, and maybe there aren't enough support mechanisms for MPs at the moment, and particularly those, I think, with large families, and whether you're a husband, wife, partner, whatever, your first responsibility is to your family, and I think a lot of MPs feel they're letting their families down with the kind of workload that they have at the moment. And I said to someone the other day, I think if I had become an MP at any point over the last 10 or 15 years, I'm pretty sure that I would not be with my partner now, because it's not, the lifestyle is just, and I think particularly, we're gay, so we wouldn't have children, so he'd be on his own for most of the week, I'd be on my own. I'm not, the implication from that is that I'd be shagging around in Westminster half the time. That's not what I was meaning. What I was meaning is that it's a very lonely existence if it's just you and your partner without kids or wider family. So I think people who go into politics have to bear that in mind.
So looking at the flip side in terms of how journalists are treated online, such as yourself, we did see it on Sunday with the whole Andrew Marr, Nigel Farage interview. you think people were quite harsh on Andrew Marr? Because I mean, essentially, he was doing his job. His job isn't to necessarily ask Nigel Farage questions that Nigel Farage wants to be asked.
I can see both sides of the argument on this one, in that Nigel Farage went onto that programme expecting to talk about the Brexit Party in the European elections. I mean, hey, why wouldn't you? And all he was asked really were questions about things he'd said in the past. Now, I think you should do a combination of those things. And when Nigel started to get a bit irritable, Andrew just kept on asking him sort of a succession of questions about things he'd said in the past. Maybe he could have been a little bit more inventive there rather than just ask the pre-prepared questions. So I can see Nigel's frustration, but then again, it's perfectly legitimate to call people out, and I do it myself. I did what I think was quite a tough interview with Nigel Farage a couple of weeks ago. It's on YouTube, and I think most people were surprised at how forensic I was and how, wasn't maybe aggressive, but it was a much more hard-hitting interview than I think people, and probably than Nigel was expecting. But I got a lot out of him. The only thing you got out of that interview on Andrew Marr was that Nigel had a bit of a flounce, and Andrew kept asking all of these questions. Did the viewer actually learn anything from that interview? The answer is no. So from both their points of view, it didn't work as an interview.